back-to-back. They have won the Stanley Cup.
I think it's tough enough to win one. We've done two, so you might as well go for three, right?
Our time, baby, back to back. That's how we do it.
What do you think of this team?
Unbelievable. Nobody can beat us. Back to back years.
It's so much fun to be a part of. The crowd can have an effect on teams. The emotions get turned up.
And then last year they gave Vezina to somebody else. Number one bullshit. Oh, number one bullshit.
Here it is for you guys. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Thunder off-season episode number 1. We've had a couple weeks to digest not winning a Stanley Cup. That's weird, right?
So weird. What's that like?
So,
and lonely.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. See comment in the chat already. We've got a action-packed show for you tonight. We've got the draft. We've got playoffs. We've lost a couple of our fan favorite players by now. Hopefully the tears have dried. And then we've also got Erik Erlendsson, your Lightning insider, coming on right around 9 o'clock. So stay tuned for that. Let's go around the horn real quick here and get your early off-season thoughts now that we've had a couple weeks to digest that Stanley Cup loss.
Go ahead, Scully.
Well, first of all, I was very lonely at the boat parade by myself. I can tell you that. I looked for you too, but didn't see you. It has been a weird off season, and we'll go through the different things that has happened this off season. But I think the Bolts have made some moves that they needed to make for future consideration, and we knew we weren't going to be able to keep the band back together every single year, and every single year we've seen one or two fan favorites go, and we're going to see that again this next season. But then again, we did lock up some other key players for some other years, so that's going to be something we're going to be able to talk about.
Yeah. I think the writing was on the wall. We talked about it from basically at the beginning of last season that it's going to be very unlikely that Andre Plot was going to be here this coming season. Good for him. He went and got paid by Pittsburgh. They're going to still be
Jersey.
Jersey. That's right. Ruda went to Pittsburgh. My bad. But he's in Jersey. He's getting that money, and it's going to be a competitive team. And he had to do what was best for him. And I think the Lightning, as you said, I think they made some really good moves. I mean, one of the very first things they did, everybody said, what was the thing we talked about the most in the playoffs? Nick Paul at any cost, right? Well, it turns out that cost us 7 years and $3.15 million.
And we did promise on one of the episodes last season that someone from this crew will wash Nick Paul's car for the entire Lightning contract that he signs. We have not heard from his people yet, so I don't know if that was officially part of the contract, but we might be washing Nick Paul's car for 7 years, guys.
Yeah, and I just kind of to hit on this early, I don't want to circle back to this later on, but if you look at the age of these guys and the length of the contracts that they just signed these guys to, this is something the Lightning have done very well. Like moving McDonough now on his contract too, is you're looking at Stamkos and Killorn, 33. He'll be 33 next year. Killorn will be here actually in a couple months. He turns 33. Stamkos will be 34 at the end of his contract. Hedman will be 34 at the end of his contract. Kucherov will be 33. Point will be 33. These new ones that they just signed long-term, 8 years for the three guys, 20 or 33, 32, 33. So these guys are signed through their primes. You know what I mean? And they're signed for mostly good contracts, I would say, mostly. And they're going to be here. You're looking at the future core of our roster that just got signed here. You know, I mean, we already had Kucherov, we already had Point signed, and we already had Vasi signed long-term. But these three guys, or four guys really, with Paul that you just saw get signed long-term, this is the core. This is our Killorn and Stamkos and Palat and Johnson and those guys that we've had the last 8 or 10 years. You know, these are the guys that are now going to be here till 2030, 2031, around there. So I really like the idea of some of these guys that they locked up here. And I think that they also made some really good moves in the draft. I paid a lot more attention to it this season, knowing that some guys like Stamkos and Killorn, and even these depth guys like Perry and Belmar and Maroon, they're not going to be here much longer. So some of those guys that they're looking at in Syracuse and some of those guys that they just drafted are going to be here in the next 2 to 3 seasons. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to in this offseason, is seeing how these lines stack up with a couple of injuries that we heard from JBB to start the season. And then really to see if any of these guys get a chance to start popping up in this roster here this season, or, you know, keep an eye on the crunch and see what they do down there and what we're going to be looking at in the next couple of years.
The one thing that kind of stood out to me, though, is for Palat only to sign $6 million at 5 years. I really think that means that the Lightning didn't go after him too hard. I don't know if they didn't really offer him much at all, but that because if he would have signed the same amount that he had before, would be that $6 million in New Jersey, in New Jersey money. So with the taxes, so I just have a feeling they really didn't go after him that hard for him to only get $6 million in New Jersey.
Well, or do you think he thought he was going to get more, and then the offers weren't coming, and this might have been the best offer he got? And, you know, at that point, you can't play, you know, Captain Hindsight and say, well, we could have kept him. If
that's what happened with Bogosian on our second cup roll. Remember, he said that he wanted to look elsewhere, and then he tried circling back to us, and they said, sorry, all the spots have been full. So that's when he had to sign that 1-year deal with Toronto and play for them when we won the second Stanley Cup. So that could be also with him. He might have said, give me your offer, I'm going to go to free agency. And then in the meantime, they went ahead and signed Serge Chernak, Sorelli to those big deals. And when he came back, it said, sorry, we got enough money to sign Names and Cole and Fleury.
Yeah. I mean, based on what I saw from JBB or heard from JBB, it seemed to me like the Lightning had a certain number that they just couldn't go above. And they tried to say, hey, this is what we can do. And they try to get creative. They try to figure out ways to make it worth it for him to stick around, where he knows he could get at least as much as he was making this year relatively, right, elsewhere. It seems to me like it was writing on the Nick Paul signing right away. That was the right away. Nope, there's no way. And then people are like, oh, we traded McDonough, we're going to keep Hallie. No. Again, to me, right away, that was a signal that they were going to lock up guys long term. This was about salary cap in the future, not about this season. So, you know, I think the writing was pretty much on the wall with Palat. Like, they tried to, and they met multiple times, according to JBB. You know, even the day before free agency or 2 days before free agency opened, they went back to each other and said, hey, what can we do? And they were just too far apart, you know, and it is what it is. But the guy, he's 31, 32, I think still. He's like the same age as Killorn. You know, and I mean, he's still playing at a good level, but at the same time, you have younger guys that are going to play for that $3 million or less and give you that. I mean, I anticipate, especially with injuries being what they are, I anticipate probably being on that top line.
Yeah,
with Kucherov and Point. Kucherov on the right, Paul on the left, Point in the middle. Hagel might be up on that second line, or maybe Names because he's got the history. And I was also thinking maybe depending on how it all goes, and we'll get into this, but Nemestikov might even see top line minute with Point centering the two Russians because those guys have history too, and you got the two Russians on either side. But anyways, yeah, I don't know what else we can get into. I feel like we're kind of just going on tangents right now. I don't want to not go off the rails, but
let's do this.
Get ahead of ourselves at all. Because I know we'll talk about some of this with Double E comes on, and then after, kind of let him give his 2 cents, and we can kind of respond a little bit too. So,
well, we got plenty of questions for Erik Erlendsson, who's going to come on and join us shortly. We also have a shooter game for after Erik is done regarding some of our new and re-signed Bolts. Why don't we go down the list though and give our grades so the people in the chat can participate a little bit here, because I know one of these was not a fan-friendly deal. One on my shirt, by the way. But let's go down the list here, and then we'll jump into the draft. So Nick Paul, 3 points. It's actually not even 3.2. It's 3.15 for 7 more years. What grade would you give that?
That's an A.
I give that an A+.
Yeah, I would say maybe A. I stick it just an A because let's see how he goes with the whole season. I mean, and it's a long term.
Half the season,
it's a long term for a guy that you've seen 50 games out of, but those 50 games have been damn impressive, and he brings everything you need to this team to fill in the hole that we lost through.
I was surprised it was 7 years. I really thought there was a 3 to 5 year deal there, not 7 years.
Yes, I thought it was a bridge deal. I really thought it was going to be a bridge deal, maybe in the $4 million range as a bridge deal, or like 3.5, a little bit more as a bridge, and then maybe. But it seems to me that JBB has shown that he's done with the bridge deals. Like he feels like now he's got the ability to lock up these cores, and this is exactly what he said in his press conference or his interview after free agency, and that was that he feels like it's a lot easier to fill in around these core guys. Yes, now you have these young talented guys locked in, and you're going to have them for the next 7 or 8 years. And with the hard cap league, it's a lot easier to fill in these $1 and $2 and $3 million contracts around them than it is to, we've got this roster built of $4, $6, $7 million contracts, and now we've got to re-sign one of our stars, and we don't have room, and now we have, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's a very, very savvy way of approaching it. And especially for a guy like him, yes, that's a long contract, but 3.2, I think he's going to outplay that contract at least over the first 5 years.
But in something that the fans watching didn't see on our last show, down at the arena, once we went off the air.
Speaking of Double E coming on,
I was getting ready to walk away, and Double E, who's getting ready to join us here in a little bit, was actually walking by and came over. I called him over, and he talked to us for a little bit. And we specifically asked him about Nick Paul, and he said Nick Paul had a real estate agent looking for a house. And if you're looking for a house somewhere you're not a free agent, somewhere that you're a free agent, you already have a deal in place. So
2 days later, he was signed.
Yeah, and he had given us a little insider information there that Nick Paul was looking for a place to live, and then we find 2 days later he had signed. So with the really inside information there. But he was saying, the cap's getting ready to go up. They know it's going to go up. So they can promise, and JBB and the Lightning and Vinnick have always fulfilled their promises. So you can go to a player and say, hey, sign a small deal, sign a 2-year deal, sign a 1-year deal. We promise on your next deal, we're going to give you a boatload of cash.
And at least 7 years.
And that's what they've done. That's what they've done in the past. But now you're seeing with guys like Sergachev, and I guess Cernak did get that kind of nice little couple-year deal too. So yeah, you do see that, and that's good to see. You saw with Cirelli as well. He kind of took a little bit of a friendly. I would say he's played up to what he's been paid at this point.
Real quick, the signing of Paul was not because of Mac, because we would have had enough money, especially with the LTIR starting the beginning of the season with Sorelli and Bogosian on the LTIR. So the McDonough loss was not, it was more of a future of the Sorelli, the Sergachev, the Churanak, and finding somebody who was willing to take that contract right now. Obviously, the two guys we got in return, don't even think they're going to make the roster anytime.
They were talking about Myers. JBB seemed to be pretty high on Myers. So, I mean,
he did. And then there was a thing that they were going to buy him out. And then they were like,
well, that was what I think everyone's speculation was when they saw the move right away, because they expected, they're going to trade him and they're trying to clear space. They don't want to bring $2.5 million back.
Right.
But then I think they kind of also knew that Rudo was maybe not going to be coming back or something. And I mean, that I don't know. All these things behind the scenes, is what you also will never know, right? We know what I do love about this franchise is that Brisebois is very forthcoming, and he is very open, and he tells it exactly, this is what I was thinking, this is what we were thinking, this is who we've been looking at, why we've been looking at them, this is why we paid them what we did for this long. So I love that he's very transparent when it comes to that, but we'll still never know all the things behind the scenes. You know what I mean? They had to know that for a 5-year deal, especially, that might even be it. It might not have even been about money. It might have been the term,
right?
And maybe the Lightning just were saying, hey, man, we can't afford to sign you for 5 years right now. We can't commit to you that much longer. If you want to do a 1-year or a 2-year deal, then we can keep doing those and then see, pay to play kind of thing, which I think we're going to see Killorn jump on that wagon that Prairie and Maroon have been on after this season. So, I mean, to me, it just seems like Palat wasn't willing to do that. He wasn't willing to take less money and less term to stay here. And that's his decision. And I feel like he deserves it. He's done what he's done on this team. And so I think that early on JBB knew that. And I also wonder about Ruda and the term there too, because I don't think that's much more than they would have given him either. 2.7. I think they would have given him at least 2.5 to stick around. It's only, I think he was making 1.75. So it's not that big of a race for him. And he was Hedman's right-hand man. You know what I mean? Like, him and Hedman were an awesome number one pair. So I think it just comes down to a little bit like some of this term, maybe, when it comes down to it as well, with these two guys that left, and seeing all these guys that got term are all in their mid-20s. All of those guys. You know what I mean? So I think that's exactly the message that you saw. So
I gotta say, I think the biggest thing that happened in the offseason and was bring back of Nemesnikov. There was more, I think, about him coming back than McDonough leaving. There was more, and Palat. I mean, the craziness around. Because when Names left, it was kind of shocking because him and Cooch were so close and everything. Right. So it was very shocking that he left. And then, we're constantly seeing him playing in teams against us. And then to hear on the 90th day until opening night, it was on number 90 before opening night in New York City. All of a sudden, they signed Nemesnikov. And he had so much fans here that it's going to be great opening night to see him back on that ice in Tampa.
Yeah. So moving on from Nick Paul, we go to Sergachev, who got the 8-year, $8.5 million extension. And I mean, you sit here and you look at Cap Friendly and you see Victor Hedman making 7.875, which I know was a team friendly deal to be able to keep, some of these, like Point, for example, to be able to pay Point, whatever. But like, I still think that, like, man, that's a lot. That's a lot for Sergei, who I still think has something to prove at 24.
I thought that was a B-.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a B-. I think it's good they're keeping him. I mean, he's a left side guy. He's going to be, there. But, I mean, you still have Hedman, who just got nominated for a Norris for 3 more seasons. he's still going to be your number one blue liner. And now you just paid this guy $1.5 million more, or $750,000 more. But I liked his response. I mean, I watched it. I don't know if you guys saw the interview on NHL Network. Those guys were like so effusive. They were giving him praise and praise and praise, and it's like, oh, you're so good. And he was like, look, I have more work to do. I have more to do. So I do like that mentality. He's not really he's not being like really cocky about it. He's not like, oh, I deserve this, it's about time, or anything else like that. But yeah, I mean, any more than 7 for him, I think, was definitely an overpay. And I don't know that. I mean, I don't know. Then he would have been, I think, a restricted free agent next season, anyways. So I don't know. No, he would have been a UFA. He would have been a UFA. Yeah, you're right. So I think that's maybe what you're kind of worried about. Is you just don't want him to hit the open market and maybe have a little bit real of a breakout season this year. But I mean, then I go back and then I do my research on Ian Cole, and I see that he was making $6 million a year at one point, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's not that much of an overpay. You know what I mean? Because Ian Cole is nice and a good guy to bring in. Well, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but yeah, I think that's a B-. And I think that moving on to Cirelli, I think that's a B as well, only because I heard on the network that he was number 5 in Selke voting this year. So he finally cracked the top 5. But the guy has never cracked 20 goals or 50 points in a season. I mean, right? Am I crazy to think that you got to be doing that to make $6 million as a forward in this league, right? It's not my. I mean, that's
I thought that was an overpay. Also, I don't know. Maybe
you're hoping.
Maybe they're projecting him on different lines. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also, and he's still not going to get that money until next season. So it's this money. It's still this for. What is it this year? 4.8 this year, which I still think has been a little bit more than he's produced. But his versatility is what really gets everybody so hyped up about him. You know what I mean? So,
and the deal that Hetty took, that was so they could re-sign Killorn that year.
Yeah, but also in the future too. I think that they were looking at long term. They knew they still needed more, but yeah, you're right, that's true. But yeah, I feel like he hasn't. It's a wait and see kind of deal, and I feel like he's already kind of got that bridge deal, and like, hey, if you produce, we'll pay you. I still don't think he's quite produced.
I honestly would have been okay with letting him get rid of him.
Listen, you go back and watch the show, bro. I was talking about how he was the guy that was the best asset to be able to move and get something in return for him. 24 with 1 year at 4.8 and a restricted free agent. You know what I mean? That's something. And I see once again Greg Gentry jumping on Killorn, and I don't want to run down the stats because I was looking at him today, and his stats fucking blow Pilots away. They blow Pilat away. Period. Even his playoff consistency. He had one bad playoff this year, and the rest of it, he's been so clutch in the playoffs. It's ridiculous. So. You could sit here and give him the thumbs down, but it is what it is. I'm not even going to get into it. Go look at the stats, dude. But look at Cirelli's stats compared to Killorn. He's whatever. So and then Cernak, again, I go back. This is an A+ for me.
Yeah, me too.
A+ on Cernak. 5.2, 8 years. This guy is going to end up being the backbone of this defense for the next 8 seasons for sure. He's going to be our next Ryan McDonough. Everyone's we lost McDonough. Well, we gained we have a Cerny. We've got a Cerny. He's been here. He's going to be our guy for sure.
But it was just amazing. The Lightning announced these: Sergachev, Cirelli, Cernak. Boom, boom, boom. My favorite tweet of that day came: Sergachev 8 years, $68 million. Cirelli 8 years, $50 million. Cernak 8 years, $41.6 million. Tampa just committed $159.6 million in 8 minutes. Yeah. Literally, it took 8 minutes from the time they announced Sergachev to the time they announced Cernak. Yeah. They really were going in that day and just announcing. I think overall between the 3 extensions, I'd give him a B.
Yeah, Cerny is 25. You're asking in the chat, Lisa. Cerny is 25. Sergachev is 24. Just turned 24. Cernak just turned 25 in May. And Cirelli just turned 25
this week.
This week.
It was this
yeah.
week, yeah.
2 days ago was his birthday, or 4 days ago, last week. Yeah. So, like I said, and all these guys' contracts are going to expire when they're 32 and 33. So, I mean, you're fine with that. You're going to get these guys in their prime. So the term is fine with me. I don't mind locking these guys up here for 8 years because you know that these guys are going to be the core, and having guys like this are going to help bring in other free agents. They're going to have people wanting to sign here. You know what I mean? So I love all those things about it. I just think that these top 2 guys here, that's an overpay for the second and third guy, I guess. Sergei and Cirelli there. Those are overpays based on production so far. Now, Cirelli has an opportunity to outplay that contract for sure. I think Sergachev is going to always be looking at trying to live up to that contract. He's always going to have that hanging over his head, which is another reason why I don't necessarily like younger guys getting that kind of a big deal, because it's going to be like kind of pressure to live up to it. But he still has 3 years of his mentor Hedman here to help him kind of adjust into that role. And I think that's really what's going to make him worth his money in the long run.
And some guys kind of need that motivation over their head. So, you heard Sergachev, I think you watched the same interview that I did. Like he was motivated by getting this contract. So,
yeah.
And lets him know the team believes in them.
Right.
Yeah, totally. The good part about this is, they're all going into the prime of their career. That's when you want to pay them. That's when they should produce the most. And since we just graded them all, plus Nick Paul, grades change, right? So Nick Paul and Erik Chernak, those look like they'll be steals for years to come. And we could totally change our mind after 2 more seasons of Sergachev and Cirelli, as they could become, I guess they are part of the core of this team, but maybe they step into more of a leadership role as some of the older guys move out and some of these young guys take some bigger roles with the team. And,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And just taking a look of, it's still a year away, but the offseason next year, what they're going to have to deal with Killorn being a UFA, Names will be a UFA, Ross Colton's an RFA, Pierre's a UFA, Corey Perry, UFA, Ian Cole, a UFA, Myers and Cal Foot, both RFAs, Elliott, a UFA. I mean, so there's going to be a lot of contracts next year. So they're just trying to lock up what they have for years to come, and going to have to puzzle build this couple of years.
Well, and that goes back to what JBB was saying, I think, in his philosophy. And I'm not mad at that when you see the way he did it this season, and he's really been able to do it the last couple seasons with guys like Bellemare and Perry and Maroon, and Colton's been outplaying his $1.125 million contract for sure. So that guy is definitely going to have to get a raise next year, But if you look at the history, he's 25. That's the only problem. He's in that age range again, but he came along a little bit later. He developed a little bit later. He didn't come up here quite as young. He spent a little bit more time in Syracuse. So, this is still only his second contract or whatever. So he will be restricted. So that gives him an opportunity to, make a deal with them and say, hey, once again, you give us 3 years, we'll have another $7 million finally in cap space. Because that was the other thing that I was kind of surprised by. I heard rumors that the cap is going up by more than $3 million this year, after hearing, otherwise
next year.
Last year. But yeah, JBB confirmed that it's only going up by $1 million again this year. So it went up by $1 million last season, and then $1 million this year, and then next year they're saying
that at the beginning of the finals, he announced it was only going up 1 year, and then next year it's going to go up. And that's the other thing, is that locking them up to these long, you don't know. I mean, this is probably why also Sergachev makes more than Hedman. It's just like in any sport, the salaries get higher. You're going to push
the market's
higher. So Sergachev, if we would have signed him to a smaller contract for a 3-year bridge deal or a 5-year, imagine when that 3 and 5 years up, a number one defenseman might then be $10 million. And that's the difference between Hedman signing in 2016, I think it was, to now, and $1 million difference. So
yeah.
All right, we got to take a timeout because you know what this sound means?
The man is here.
Mean one or three things. In this case tonight, that means that we are being joined by Erik Erlendsson, Lightning insider, joining the show from a lush resort. It looks like. Eric, welcome back to We the Thunder. Let me give you one of these, just to blow out your ears a little bit before you get started.
I had the volume turned down well enough that didn't blow out the ears. So.
He came prepared, folks. All right, so you probably heard us kind of yapping a little bit about some of these re-signings, about some of these new players, or I guess some old players coming back to join the squad again. Was there anything that really kind of surprised you so far this offseason?
I mean, I guess maybe McDonough being traded. They had the clear salary cap space. There's a reason they protected McDonough in the expansion draft, right? Because they felt that the defense needed to be kept together as much as possible. That's why you expose Yanni Gourde and Alex Killorn and Andre Palat and all that group of forwards that you could have chosen to protect over McDonough, but they were afraid of moving McDonough. Now the salary cap always comes into a factor, and $6.75 million for the next 4 years. It's a big commitment if you're going to keep Ryan McDonough. I get it. But maybe the trade surprised me a little bit because I didn't think that he was going to be the guy to be moved. Other than that, like the extensions to Chernak, Cirelli, Sergachev, they really didn't surprise me at all because you can look at the philosophy of Julian Breezeball and the front office staff and how they determine how they keep players. I mean, look at all these guys. They fall right in line with Steven Stamkos, with Nikita Kucherov, with Andrei Vasilevsky, with Braden Point. They all took the shorter or the less bridge deals with the understanding they would be taken care of once they got to their next contract. Well, all three were taken care of when they got their next contract. And, 8.5 for Mikhail Sergachev and 6.3 for Anthony Cirelli and 5.3. My numbers might be off a little bit, but for Erik Chernak, you have to try and keep your team together. As much of the core together as you can to keep this team competitive. And that meant sacrificing Ryan McDonough, unfortunately. And so nothing else has surprised me. Maybe Nemestikov coming back. He was a guy I remember having a conversation with Greg Linnelli that he's the kind of guy that could kill your cap, right? Because he was having a pretty good year. The year he was traded, he was on pace for 20 goals and playing with Kucherov and Stamkos, the Stamkov line. That they kind of put together. But for him to come back, he's a much different player, I think, now than he was when he left in 2018. He's a much better penalty killer. Mm-hmm. He can get on the power play. He's more of a middle 9 kind of guy, is maybe a top 3. So he kind of fits a lot of the needs that the team needs, especially with the loss of Andre Palat. But I think the only thing that kind of caught me off guard a little bit was the McDonough trade.
Yeah, and I was curious on that trade. Have you done any research in the return and any indication on what the team's planning to do with the players that they did get back? Are these players that we could see playing for the Lightning next season?
Well, I think we'll start with Mishmash. Obviously, a 23-year-old forward who's still trying to find his way. I don't know where he falls in the depth chart just yet. The interesting one to me is Philip Myers because he's 6'5". He's a right-handed shot defenseman. He was highly touted in Philadelphia, never kind of came to fruition, didn't really find his game in Nashville. There's a lot of tools there. And maybe the thing that surprised me the most about Myers is he had a buyout cap where you actually got a credit if you bought him out, which – hey, they're up against the cap, right?
Yeah,
so you
like
thought maybe
600,000 or something.
Yeah, which is it's a bit unusual. Yeah. So there was a lot of speculation on whether or not they would actually buy him out in order to get that cap credit. But I think there's a lot of tools. 6'5", 230 pounds. The right-hand shot, especially with Zach Bogosian, as we learned, undergoing shoulder surgery. He's going to miss at least the first month plus of the season. Does it open up an opportunity for him to find some playing time, and maybe you can find out where he is? That's the guy I'm intrigued by, because we know how much right-hand shot defensemen are coveted by teams, especially this team in particular. That's the guy I want to see. What's he going to be like in training camp? His third team now since he turned pro. He's only 24, 25 years old.
25, yeah.
Is he ready to kind of take the next step in his development to kind of push himself to a level that maybe he hasn't been at yet? And look, the Lightning have a history of doing this, right? Like, there's a few players that they have kind of brought back into the fold or brought into the fold that were – I mean, Jan Rutta was that way, right? Like, Jan Rutta was a middling defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks, split between the AHL and the NHL, and they turned him into a player who – could play alongside Victor Hedman and wasn't going to hurt your team. And I thought, Rutta in particular in this postseason was really good after the Toronto series when he got back in the lineup. So they have a history of doing this with players. So he's the guy that I'm really interested to see what they're able to do with him, and are they able to get him to a level that he hasn't been to yet.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking at too. I mean, especially when you look at and even when Bogosian's healthy, I mean, I think we can all agree that there could even be an upgrade there. You know what I mean? There's potential for upgrading in Bogosian's spot. And with him being that right-handed guy, he's got the size. And like I said, JBB was very high on him when they talked about him and we talked about him in his interview. So I heard the rumors just like everyone else that they were going to buy him out. But it does sound like they have some kind of plan for him going through this season. And again, you said it, he's 25 and a right-handed shot defenseman. If he can show some growth in this program, that we've shown that we can grow defenders here, so yeah, there's definitely some upside there, potential for this guy.
And they're a little thin, right, on defense. I mean, that's the one thing
sure.
we've done in trade, is really thinned out the defense a little bit on both sides, right? I mean, you lose Rutta, you lose McDonough. It's really thinned out things on both sides of the defense. And after you get past Erik Chernak, I mean, Cal Foote still hasn't put himself into a position where you can consider him an everyday player. He looked really good early on in the postseason, for sure. You've seen a lot of strides taken from him. You got Myers. You got Nick Perbix. I'm really interested to see how Nick Perbix develops this year. He's a 24-year-old, a little bit later than a lot of rookies coming into the league, with the 4-year career at St. Cloud State, plus the 1 year in the USHL with Omaha. How he kind of develops as a right-hand shot defenseman. Again, good size at 6'4".
He always looks
offense to his game.
He always looks great at development camp. The Lightning just haven't brought him up. But in the development camp, he's a lot of talks from all the insiders, from the Lightning all the way up, is that this could be his year to possibly crack the lineup. And even when we've seen where there's been some crack in the defense up in the majors, that they don't bring him up. They haven't brought him up yet. So
yeah.
Well, he'd been in college, right? So you can't. It's not a situation where he's in the minors, so you can't bring him up. Whether they tried to sign him or not, I've never heard that they were trying to do that. You would have to do that obviously before the collegiate season started. But yeah, look, he even said it. It really wasn't till his junior year. This is something I wrote on the website. It really wasn't until the start of his junior year he felt that maybe he could be an NHL player. Mm-hmm. He kind of got off to a really good start his junior year for St. Cloud State, and that's when he started to think, okay, maybe the NHL is a realistic situation for him. And even since then, his game has grown. Obviously, on the U.S. Olympic team last year when the NHL pulled out, participating with their players, had an opportunity to represent the United States. I think that was a big confidence boost for him. That's why I'm interested to see how his development is. He's not going to start in Tampa Bay unless he has an absolutely outstanding training camp. I mean, look, we know Braden Point is the only player who's made that jump straight from junior without going ever to Syracuse, other than the short stint he got at the end of his junior season. Players don't usually make that jump in this organization. So I don't foresee him starting in Tampa Bay, but if he gets off to a quick start in Syracuse, especially with the Bogosian injury, I could see an opportunity where he can kind of come in and kind of make a name for himself.
And Sergachev did that also, right? Then Sergachev, he never went to Windsor. He told them he was never coming back. He was going to make the team and not come back to Windsor.
Yeah, and he was a different situation. His was either he goes back to Windsor or he stays in the NHL, right? Like, he didn't have AHL eligibility at that point.
Right, he was too young, right?
Yeah, he was a little too young. He had one more year. So a lot of those players in that situation, it's either back to junior or in the NHL, there's no AHL route for them.
Yeah. So the other guy like that we're talking about is also they signed Hayden Fleury for a minimum for 2 years too, and he's the other guy that's, can play both sides, hasn't really got there 26, and I'm curious. There's room, like we were talking about with Bogosian going down, McDonough and Ruda. There's going to be shakeups to the pairings all up and down the blue line now. We're not going to see the same pairings at all next season. So there's going to be opportunities here for multiple guys to come in and show. And I think Ian Cole is a good guy. I think it's a little bit much at $3 million. But if you look at his history, he's kind of been a little bit overpaid throughout his career for some reason. And but he's won. He's got a lot of playoff experience. He's won a couple cups. He's played for a lot of different teams, which a lot of these guys haven't. So I think that brings some locker room experience, maybe that some of these guys are perspective that they don't have. So they made some good moves in the defense, but there's going to definitely be opportunity for some guys to step up and really earn some minutes, some playing time, and maybe some cash here in the future.
Yeah, and Ian Cole in particular, like he's not coming in to replace Ryan McDonough, but he's going to take some of Ryan McDonough's minutes, right? Yeah. Obviously, Sergachev is going to get that elevated role to a number 2 left-hand side defenseman. But, Ian Cole's going to come in, and he's probably going to play 17, 18 minutes a night. He's going to take over that penalty kill situation that McDonough had, I would imagine, with Chernak. The big thing for me with the revamped defense heading into camp, who plays with Victor Hedman? I mean, right. Ron Ruda for 4 years was a steady partner, and he had holes. He had flaws in his game, but he was a consistent, steady partner. He understood what it took to play with Victor Hedman. I don't know if you can look at this roster right now and say, well, this guy for sure is going to play with Victor Hedman. That's going to be something I think from the start of training camp, right off the bat, is something that they're going to have to figure out who can play on the right side with Victor Hedman.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking maybe Cernak, but at the same time, who you're going to put with Sergachev? You know what I mean? Like, you got to have someone that you trust on the other side of Sergachev too. And so you're basically going to have to decide which of those two guys Cerny fits best with, really, in my eyes, and then who the second right-hand guy is going to be. So you're absolutely right. That's their biggest consideration right now, is that really the pairings on the right side of that D, because the left side, I think with bringing in Ian Cole, I think your left side's pretty solid for your 3 guys on that side. It's that right side after Cernak. Who is it for sure?
Well, I really think this is where Foot's going to have to show up or show out, because I don't think they'll stay with the experiment long. Coop definitely won't. I
think the first half of the year is going to be that way, though.
Yeah,
who can play, right? Like, because let's face it, this is a playoff team. Things can happen for sure. Injuries can happen. But at the end of the day, this is a playoff team. And John Cooper's referenced this before. I've written a few times that the regular season, in a lot of ways, is a dress rehearsal for the playoffs. So I think you are going to see a lot of experimentation. Who can play? Can it be Calfoot? Does Chernak play with Hedman? And can you put Chernak alongside – can you put Foot alongside Sergachev? We saw it a few times this year, right? Mm-hmm. Like when McDonough was injured, we saw Chernak go up with Victor Hedman. We saw Chernak play with Mikhail Sergachev. So you saw a little bit of a glimpse at certain points during the regular season and even the postseason of who might be able to play with who. But going back to even when they acquired Kevin Shattenkirk, prior to the 1920 season, we all thought Shattenkirk was going to be a really good partner for Victor Hedman. Turned out it didn't tend to be the case, and they went back to Ruud in that situation. So what we think on paper right now here in July and into August, sometimes it doesn't always fit the mold once you get into training camp and put players together.
Yeah. Well, and that doesn't stop at the blue line this season either. The forwards are going to be looking at a very similar situation. Losing a couple guys, and then just looking at where Hagel and where Paul are going to fit in with the full season now. There's a lot of interesting things to be following here going into training camp. I think for the first time in a while with this team, we talked about they had replaced a couple guys the last couple seasons, but it was a fairly seamless transition, and I feel like this year there's quite a few things that are going to be tweaked, changed. Yeah. We're going to see a lot of different lineups, a lot of different line mates, combinations than we were used to seeing. Oh, these are our core things, and then Cooper's kind of switching them up on the fly and mixing and matching a little bit. But these are the core things we're happy. We're going to see.
When we lost Yanni, Pickles, and Gaudreau, it wasn't really anybody brought in. It was just next man up.
Right.
Now you have the midseason pickups here of Hagel and Paul coming in that definitely I don't think and we talked about this before you came on, we don't think they're going to stay together on the same line that we were, that, you know, they'll probably move up. You might have a Nemesnikov up there, maybe playing with Cooch, his old bestie. What do you think, how the lines are going to pair out? Do you think Paul gets those top two lines, Nemesnikov fits in there?
Yeah, it's funny. I have some work for Hockey News that I got to put together here in the next couple of days on a depth chart. And I'm going through the depth chart. I was like, is Paul going to play wing or is he going to play center? Where's Brandon Hagel going to play? Ooh, are they going to keep Stamkos, Palat's obviously not here, but are they going to keep Stamkos and Kucherov together? Put Kucherov back on point. I mean, there's a lot of question marks. I mean, I think we all know the fourth line probably sits with Belmar and Perry and Maroon, just like it was for a good chunk of last season. But how do the top nine kind of fill around, right? Like, where do you put in Nemesnikov? He had great chemistry with Stamkos and Kucherov. Do you try that again? You know, obviously Anthony Cirelli's injury factors into this a little bit. The interesting thing to me with all of this, you know, where we put players and who's on the depth chart, with Cirelli out, who gets that 12th forward spot?
Right.
Does Alex Barré-Boulet get another opportunity?
No.
Yeah.
Do they bring Cole Koepke up? He had a great rookie season, right?
Yeah.
Do you look at a guy like Gage Gonzalez, right?
Yeah,
like he had a really good rookie season. Right?
And I was just going to say, they didn't bring Riley Nash back. So with that injury, who's that 12th forward? And I mean, if you look at the roster right now, well, I'm just saying though, because he was filling that role last season. Sure. That's all I'm saying. Not like it was we expected him to. I'm just saying that was the guy that filled that role when the forwards went down. And now, I mean, if you look at the cap friendly, they've got ABB on that list right now. And I don't know
he's on a contract. Because he's on a one-way contract, right?
Exactly.
So you factor that in, and same thing with Hayden Fleury. He's factored in, depending on what happens in training camp against the Cap. So, there's a lot of really for the first time, and probably, please ignore my son in the background. There's a lot of question marks on who's going to play with who's going to stick around, who's going to be there. The Cirelli injury obviously changes a few things looking ahead to the start of the regular season and where things are going to shake out. And really, is Stamkos going to stay at center, or are they going to move him back to win? To me, I thought he played great at center. He had the best season of his career, I think primarily because he was back in the middle. I think you have to keep him back in the middle, but training camp determines a lot of situations. And for the first time in a while, we've got some question marks heading into training camp in terms of not only who makes the roster, but who plays with who.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, man, we appreciate you coming on. Let's, if you don't mind, let's do a little rapid.
Keep me around. I'm good.
Hey, real quick, though, can we go to a question from the chat? There you go.
Yeah,
I was going to
right the question.
Yep. What do you think about Blashill? You know Stephanie, and Stephanie, you are God to her. So, if anybody answers every single question he has, it will be Stephanie, because Stephanie loves E's insight. And so what do you think about Jeff Blashill joining us?
Well, obviously there's a strong relationship between John Cooper and Jeff Blashill, going back to the days of the I don't even know what, the Little Caesars League, right? Little Caesars and everything like that. I mean, they've known each other for a long time, so it didn't surprise me at all that once Derek Lalonde went to Detroit, that Jeff Blashill was a free agent, that he was going to land here, right, because of the strong relationship. You bring that head coaching experience. It never hurts to have guys who have been in that situation before. He's going to have some personnel he's going to have to get used to. I think he's going to have a lot to do with the penalty kill in these situations. I think the dynamic is going to stay the same, where Rob Zettler's still going to run the defense and Coop is obviously still going to run the bench. But I think you're going to get Blashill involved a lot on the penalty kill. You even heard Julian Brisebois at the first day of free agency talk about Vlad Nemesnikov and how good of a penalty killer he turned into under Jeff Blashill, right? So I think you're going to get him involved in a lot of that. And it never hurts to have strong voices in there. And, what you don't want, and I don't think Jeff Blashill is this way, you don't want a yes man. right? You don't want a guy coming in and just says, yes, I agree with this. Yes, I agree with this. No, you want guys who have been in the situation before to, I don't want to say challenge, because challenge can be kind of a strong word, but kind of give a different viewpoint to a coaching staff. Because let's face it, John Cooper's tenure here is the exception in the NHL. I mean, the shelf life of an NHL coach is probably 3 or 4 years, and certainly the success has helped. But he's been here for 9 years, so it never hurts to have a little bit of an outside perspective from a coaching standpoint when you've been around a lot of these same players for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever it's been, to kind of get a different viewpoint on things. So I think that's where Jeff Blashill is going to come into it. And he's going to add that situation to where he has been a head coach before, and he's going to have that voice of reason or a voice of perspective that he can add to this coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think that's key with Lalonde going, because I think Lalonde had that similar role here. I don't think he was a yes man whatsoever. I think that him and Coop had very good byplay. They kind of looked at things from opposite ends of the spectrum, but with the same kind of motivation and same, end game. And so it's nice to have a guy going out and kind of a guy coming in that could kind of fill that role, but maybe with a different perspective. And any help that this team can get on the penalty kill is welcome, because it has not been good historically for a while. The PK has been fairly mediocre overall. They've shown some peaks, but there's been a lot of valleys too. So if we can get anything steady on the PK, I think it really cost us in the postseason this last year, really. So that's the welcome help for me.
I'm more worried about
the full year of Nick Paul, I think, helps.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. I'm more worried about the power play in the playoffs really, really cooling off. How much of that do you think was the Braden Point effect of just not having him there in the middle?
I think that factors into it. I think at times, even when Braden Point is on the power play, they can be too predictable, right? Like everybody knows Kucherov's trying to find Stamkos across the ice. When he does it, it's magic. When he doesn't do it, we all go, why is he trying to make that pass, right? But I think Point's absence misses was factored in a little bit, because there were times where we watched that power play in the playoffs, and this is not a knock on Corey Perry, but there were times where the puck was on Corey Perry's stick, where he tried to settle it down, where Braden Point knows he has to fire it off right away. Right. And that's just chemistry between Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov. Again, it's not a knock on Corey Perry. Corey Perry is an unbelievable player. He's got great hands around the net. He didn't play with a top unit for most of the first half of the year, for most of the season, really. It's certainly not with Kucherov, who didn't come back until January. But I think the Point's absence factored in there, because there were plays where Braden Point probably connects, or at least gets a grade A scoring chance, to where, Corey Perry fumbled the puck a little bit, and it gives the goaltender and that defenseman down low an opportunity to come over and change the play. But I would like – look, we saw a little bit in the playoffs. We saw Stamkos kind of rotate around. He would go down low. He would come up high. He would move over the circle. He'd go low on the circle. So they tried some movement to try and free things up a little bit and just give a different look, because I think that at times this power play can be a little too predictable.
Yeah, there's one thing on that power play that, kind of got this group here during the playoffs, and we could not figure out why they took Killer off that power play unit, that first line unit in front of the net. You have any insight to that?
When Point got hurt, they moved Perry up, and then they moved Palat, and they put Killer on that second line and second PK or PP power play. And I wonder if that was just them trying to redistribute the talent, or they got in their heads a little bit too much. But I think his postseason struggled for that, and the power play, like the team and the player struggled because of that one move.
I think what it comes down to is Corey Perry is such a great net front presence. I think they kind of took away a little bit from Killorn, right? Because that's what Killorn's role is supposed to be, down low, is retrieval and net front. Well, Corey Perry, even though he was in the bumper spot, that Point was, he kind of looked at himself as a net front presence. And I think that kind of changed. And I think they wanted to give a little bit of a different net front on the second power play. And also, I know that Alex Killorn's name did not come up on the postseason injury list. I have a hard time believing he wasn't dealing with something. I mean, you don't go from the regular season that he had to having 0 goals in the postseason. Now, he had one. Yeah. He had one. He got taken off, obviously, in the game against Florida. But yeah, it's just odd for a guy who, in every other deep playoff run the Lightning have had, he's had 8 goals.
Clutch.
He had 0.
Yeah, he's been clutch in every other playoff. Especially if you go and look at the ratios of points to games played in the postseason, he's well over it's like 0.8 points a game or something like that. So like he's a pro gamer, and that's why everyone's get rid of Killer this year. Well, yeah, okay, he had one off season, it wasn't the greatest, but that whole line struggled too. And there was a lot of times they got bounces that didn't go their way. They were creating pressure, and they had opportunities, and not everything goes your way every night out there either. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I thought that was the power play. I think they kind of, once they lost point, they need to find a way to create an identity in the power play that isn't about Braden Point. I think, you know what I mean? Because that's what gets them predictable, is that without Point, then they don't know what to do. Kind of, you know what I mean? They get set back to either right, and either Kucha's trying to do too much off the half wall, or Hedman's trying to get it over to Stamkos for the one-timer every time. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's those same 2 plays.
Well, and Hedman stopped shooting.
Well, that too. And I feel
for whatever reason,
Hedman gets worried about shooting when Point's out there, because Point's one of the better guys on retrieval there in front of the net. And whenever you have Killer down there below the net and Point above the net, that gives you a lot more confidence on the blue line, with Hedman trying to maybe take a shot that gets blocked or something like that too. So
Kim Ricci's asking, what do you think about Gabe Fortier? Do you think he makes it onto the roster this year?
Showing last season in spurts.
Yeah, I think he has a chance. I mean, he showed in the brief time that he came up in December that he has a tenacity to play at this level. He's kind of the prototypical type of player who works hard, like all the things we talk about every year at the draft: character, competitiveness. Can you skate? Do you have leadership skills? I mean, Gabe Fortier fits a lot of those bills. The fact that he got his first goal didn't hurt either. I think he has an opportunity to kind of knock down that door. He's already been there. And how many times have we seen even a Palat or a Tyler Johnson or these players who have come up and gotten a little taste of it, got a little cup of coffee, for lack of a better term, and found themselves in the NHL a year or two later? I think he has that opportunity for sure. He's somebody that we can talk about, with the Cirelli injury, who opens up the opportunity. If Gabe Fortier comes in and has a really good camp, I could see him, cracking this roster coming out of training camp.
And then I have one more question for you, and that is, what do you think about this draft from us with Isaac, Howard, and the other one, really, Lucas Edmonds?
Really for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Not a shift in philosophy, but maybe a shift in reaching. Reaching is a bad term, but they went for more skill in this draft, right? After the last number of years, all those characteristics we just talked about: leadership, character, determination, competitiveness, all that stuff that they tend to look for in players, where this year, not that those players don't necessarily have that, but maybe a little bit more on the skill side, because some of the attrition of success means you're not picking high. You don't have a lot of blue chip type prospects staying in the system, right? Like you have to rely on guys like Cole Koepke to develop. You have to rely on guys like Jack Finley and Gage Gonsalves to develop. And whether they do or not, and they're still certainly in that situation where they can develop into that. But you look at, what Isaac Howard has done, especially with the development program. I mean, one of the top 10 scorers in that program's history. And, I saw him try to pull off a Michigan in the 3-on-3 tournament in Brandon the one day that I was out there, right?
Yeah.
And he is the best guy. He told us all that, right? He was the best guy.
Yeah, I like his swagger he's got on him.
Yeah, I mean,
he wasn't wearing socks with the suit, so he fits in with the guys right away. He already fits in with the fashion.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's kind of, you sit here and you look at the salary cap, or you look at the contracts, and you see, like we were talking about before you came on, and a little bit before the show too, is Stamkos, Killorn, Belmar, Perry, Maroon. The next 2 or 3 years, these guys are going to be, a couple of those guys are going to be gone. Stamkos and Killorn are going to have real serious decisions on how much they want to make to play here, how much longer they're going to be able to play here. They're not getting any younger. They've both got, had great careers and everything else. So, I mean, some of these, you got to kind of make these moves in the draft this year, because these guys could very well be 2 or 3 seasons away from filling those holes that were we're going to be talking about and having to have an impact on this team.
And I think this offseason gave a little glimpse of that, right? Because
yes, absolutely.
When they talked about Andre Palat and how many dollars were left for him to potentially stick around, well, I mean, Julian came right out and said it. Basically, they have younger guys that they feel that need to be locked up. And, Cirelli's 24 years old. Erik Chernak is 25 years old. Mikhail Sergachev is 24 years old. Even Braden Point is 24, 26 years old.
26.
I think those are Braden Point is, right? So, I mean, you can see that. So it really is. We're going to look back in 8-9 years at this tenure from 2015 to however long this window stays open. And particularly in the way that Julian has kind of approached things since he took over as GM in prioritizing what he's prioritized, right? Like he wanted to keep Andre Palat, but there were certain parameters he wasn't willing to go over. So it's difficult. Those are difficult decisions. Trading Ryan McDonough, that's a difficult decision, but he understands in order to keep this window open as long as you want to, as long as you can with this core and with the veterans that you have to make certain quote-unquote sacrifices to make it work. And I think that we're going to look back at this in 6-7 years and go, wow, what a great job Julian did in trying to maintain as much competitiveness out of this group and out of this team as possible, considering everything he gave up. I mean, they had a first-round draft pick this year. They don't have one for another 2 years, right? Yeah. Like he's already traded the 23 and the 24 first-round draft pick in order to bring in a Brandon Hagel, to bring in a Nick Paul, and all these players. And
Hagel's 23, and that's the thing. Hagel's 23, and it's shown that he can be productive with top talent in this league.
And even Nick Paul's 27.
Right.
Signed to a 7-year contract. So like these big ticket contracts, so to speak, are not being handed out to 31-year-olds. Right.
No,
they're being handed out to 24 and 25-year-olds. So even when they come to the end of these contracts, they're going to be 33, 34 years old at the oldest. And that's how you keep a competitive team competitive as long as possible.
Well, and that was one thing I saw. The main commentary that I saw, the main, consistency is that's exactly it. Brandon Point's going to be 34 at the end of his contract. Kucherov's going to be 34. Stamkos 34. Clone 34. Paul's 34. 33, 34 for all these guys. They're going to be right in that perfect point where you got them for their prime, and they're going to be, they're going to be looking for those short-term deals or whatever else after that. And maybe they stay, maybe they don't. But for the next 7 or 8 years what the core of your team's going to be, and you can build around that now.
Yeah, that's the key. That's how you keep a window open as long as possible. I mean, Chicago was able to squeeze 3 cups out of their window, but look what's happened to them since that 15 cup, right? I don't think they've gotten out of the first round since then. They caught up with them. Look, the cap is going to catch up with this team. It's inevitable. Even, the fact that, with the flat cap the last couple of off seasons, it's crazy to think that Julian's been able to keep this team intact as he has, right?
It still doesn't get the award for it.
Yeah. Now the cap is going to go up significantly after this coming season. Obviously, it's only going up $1 million this year, which helps, but it doesn't help enough. But that's why they were able to lock in Sergachev and Chernak and Cirelli to these contracts, because they know there's going to be a significant raise. It's funny because, Julian's question or answer to that question, boy, did I phrase that poorly. I phrased it. I tried to say, hey, signing these guys this contract, does that give you an indication the cap is going up? I meant to say after the 23 season. Obviously, he jumped on me a little bit because I didn't frame it the right way. So he was only talking about this year. So the cap is only going up $1 million this year. It's going to go up significantly after next season because of the TV contracts that have kicked in.
They just had amazing revenue this last season.
Yeah, and all the debt from the players' side under the CBA is going to be paid back. So it's going to be a huge jump, and that's why you're able to make these contracts and lock these guys in on the deals that you did.
And you didn't get to hear us, but right before you signed on, we praised you about how the last game of the season when we lost in Colorado, you came and talked to the 3 of us after we had already
after the show when we weren't on
air about Nick Paul buying a house, and 2 days later he signs the deal. So and it's funny because I went to locker cleanout day And I was like, so you're going to be back, right? You're looking for a house. And he looked at me like, how in the world do you know? And then the very next day signs the deal. So,
Hey, and I want to let you know, though, you told all of us that off the air after the show. And none of us went and posted anywhere. And like the next day, you definitely wrote something about it, like your little scoop. So just let you know, you can share information with us, and we're not going to scoop. Okay.
So I just want to say, so does that mean, Thomas, when Nick referred to the fact that everybody told him, hey, we want you to stay, that you were the first guy that told him that?
No, but I'll tell you what, I love your clean out day. We did have Michelle Blevins, who's usually on here watching. Her little daughter drew him a picture, and he actually asked her to sign it before she gave it to him. And she said how much she loved him, and he said that, and his shirt actually said family that day, I believe is what it said. And we were teasing him, don't forget what your shirt says, because Tampa Bay is your family now. Yeah. And he's like, you guys mean a lot. You guys have done a lot for me since I've been here. And I know somebody else who her boyfriend waited on him over at Armature Works, and they said he couldn't believe someone recognized him when they said, aren't you Nick Paul? And he's like, you recognize me? And he's like, yeah. And he ended up being like a genuine, really good guy. So it's great having some more of that here in the community, because Pointer's that way too. You see a lot of them who like to live privately. Kucherov, he likes to be very private. But you have Maroon, who's out a lot. You have Sorelli, who's in the community a lot. Killorn. You see them like even at WWE Raw last night. If you look behind the announcers, there were some of the players. So it's great seeing the players that are out in the community again, back the way it used to be. Because we talked about this when we did a Rays podcast, how much the Rays fail with being out in the community and the players being out in the community. And the Lightning used to do those signings, but now so many people have signed with the big companies, so they can't do the signings like they used to. But it's great that they are still out in the community and going to dinner and being just common folks and talking to the fans. So yeah, it's really nice to have someone like Paul back here.
Yeah, it's crazy that they're still hanging out in town, because, a lot of these guys just take off for the summer and go on vacation and whatnot. I know a lot of them did. Sergachev was in Mexico when he got the news. The other crazy part is that you guys don't believe the Lightning insider is an insider and doesn't have this kind of scoop.
I do.
I knew as soon as he said that. Oh, Nick Paul, I'm getting I ordered a jersey that day.
All this.
Hey, it's amazing though. We players talk about being sold on an area. And look, and the organization did a great job. I mean, how many times did Nick Paul mention, even his fiance, how many times the players' wives reach out to them and welcome them here and really brought them in. But the community is part of that, right? So like that little story about Michelle and the picture, I mean, those things resonate. They really do resonate. And I think it absolutely brings players to an understanding. I mean, let's face it. Everybody thinks it's Tampa Bay. It's not a hockey market. They don't care about hockey. It's an SEC hockey town, right? That's exactly what ESPN said and Wilbon said, right?
Jackass Wilbon.
But look, the community sells the players on this stuff too. And, I remember even Mike Johnson going back to 2001, 2002, early on, where he talked about the difference between Toronto and Tampa. He could go out to a mall in Tampa, and he'd be recognized, but he wouldn't be bothered, right? And that matters to players. So, it's great for fans to be able to interact with the players, but not put them in an uncomfortable situation. That stuff sells. That stuff sells the players in a situation to where when they're considering whether they want to move on from the area or whether they want to stay in the area, that stuff matters, and it's great to hear stuff like that.
I think it's all Davis Island. They all have the golf carts. They live close to each other. Good luck getting that in Columbus, Johnny Goudreau.
You're not
you
getting
ain't getting that out there.
And Corey
Perry neighbor with Tom Brady.
Yeah, well, and Corey Perry talked about that whenever he came here, leading into last season, how these guys all live, not all, but a good amount of them live right down there with a few miles of this arena. A good amount of them live there on Davis Island within a few blocks of each other. You don't get that in other cities. Even the Bucks. I remember when I first moved here back in the early 2000s, and I was doing the pool mechanic thing. a lot of the Buccaneers all live down there on Davis Island, and then the coaches were all in Cheval or up in, and they all, there was like little pockets here and there where they live close to each other. And I think Tampa brings that where a lot of organizations don't. And the city has a big deal once you get here, but I think the organization itself is a mirror of this city, And I mean, if you look at the piece that Chris Cran wrote about Lucas Edmonds and how he's talking about every time he met with the Lightning, they made him feel like family. Some of those other interviews you do with other teams, there's 10 guys just staring you down and it's awkward and everything else. And, he said if he was a free agent, he would have signed her anyway. So he was really excited that they made the move to move up in the third round and bring him in. They've had their eye on him and he had his eye on this place. So I think that, again, just kind of echoes what we've talked about, the kind of community and the kind of, how attractive this market has become to incoming players.
It's an atmosphere that you can feel when you're in Amalie Arena. There's no doubt about it, from you guys in the stands to the players on the bench and everything else. You can feel it. You really can. And success helps a big time, but, this team had success in 2004. Mm-hmm. It went away pretty quickly. The lockout certainly factored into that a lot. The team went downhill a little bit. But since 14, since Jeff Vinik took over this team, it's different. It's different, and I think it's still a lot of people will look from the outside, as Michael Wilbon did, and say, well, look, they only care because the team wins. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it truly is an atmosphere where everybody feels like they're a part of something. And I think that's what Jeff Vinik has been able to do with this franchise. He's transcended just the hockey community, right? Like he is a part of the Tampa Bay community in so many aspects that the hockey team is just a part of it. And everybody feels like they're a part of something. And look, I think with players, I think that resonates and it matters.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I didn't put this shirt and this hat on just for the show. This is what I woke up this morning and got dressed in and went out and wore along Tampa Bay. And I don't know about you guys, but after the end of the season, I didn't see any less Tampa Bay Lightning flags or merchandise or apparel or anything else. Just as many billboards, just as many Go Bolts banners and flags. That didn't get taken down after the end of the season. It stays up.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a short
community pride.
I mean, absolutely.
It's not a fad anymore.
There's not a fad. It is not a trend. It is a way of life in Tampa Bay. Being a Lightning hockey fan, it's a way of life. It's part of this community. And you're absolutely right. Jeffrey Vinik, Mr. Vinik as an owner has done more, not just as a franchise, but as the city too. The city's not the same as it was in 2014, let alone this franchise. And he has almost everything to do with that.
So, we had to have that bad with the Saul
Pony show
and Melrose. Yeah. Like literally, that's when Vinik took over and it started building, and it was such huge news that the franchise owners of Saul was the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that opened a lot of people's and you had Barry Melrose, who everybody knew that all of a sudden he was now the coach, and this was this big Hollywood team, and started making their name. And then 20-something games,
like 3 weeks.
Yeah, he was gone. And then, then we had Vinik, who comes in here as a minority owner of the Boston Red Sox, and he had all these investments, and all of a sudden that gets more eyes on it. And so it really started the first year, I think Mr. Vinik came in here, not even knowing this many years later what he was going to build that franchise. But it started with, you had to get the shit to get the name out there. And then Mr. Vinik has polished it off.
One of the greatest things that Jeff Vinik.
Are you saying that he just polished a turd? Were you saying that Tampa was a turd and he's come and polished it? He's polished a turd.
The greatest thing that Jeff Vinik did was bringing in Steve Yzerman that first year.
Absolutely.
Because he was persistent.
Yep.
He would not take no for an answer. He didn't hire anybody else. He kept going back to Steve Yzerman. And considering what went on the previous couple of years, I mean, look, Marty St. Louis was ready to leave. Steve Yzerman became the GM. He's like, okay, I'll stay. I can see a vision now, right? So it was instant credibility. And that's one thing. But the job that Steve Yzerman did in setting a tone, establishing a culture, everything else that's gone on with this team started with the day Steve Yzerman was hired, and it's carried right on through with Julian Brisebois. He's maintained that philosophy, taken it to a different level with maybe a different boldness, specifically when it comes to the trade deadline and what Julian was willing to give up in order to make the team better. Yeah, it's just Jeff Vinik is – I remember early on, longtime employees of the franchise said, we need to get Jeff Vinik a Pope-mobile because we don't want anything bad to happen to this man because he's as genuine as he seems, and he means so much to us right now that he's just given the whole franchise stability that wasn't there in the previous number of years. And he's come in, and he's just done a tremendous job of putting this team on the community map as a whole, not just as a hockey team.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You couldn't say that any better. Absolutely.
Well, hey, Eric, we will we'll let you go, man. Thanks for hopping on again. I think you are the most I think you've been on the show more than anyone else. I think you are our number one guest at this point. Nobody has been on this show more. Maybe this guy Ty, who calls in occasionally, but he's not allowed to
definitely
call
number
in
one in our
anymore.
hearts.
Tell the people. I think everyone that watches this show knows who you are and how to find you. But tell the people how they support you. Give them a little inkling of what's going on at Lightning Insider this summer.
In honor of Rob being here last night, a little shameless self-promotion.
I'm still trying to get Stash to write an article, and then I was going to beg you to publish it on your website.
Hey,
if it's
my
up to the
website's always
standards.
open. It might take some editing skills involved, but first of all, I want to publicly say to you guys, and especially everybody else, the support that you've given me specifically over the last 6 years since the paper went under in 2016. For me to still be here 5 years later, the site went live in December 2016 and went behind a paywall in January of 17. So here I am 5 years later, still able to put forth something I still have a passion for, but it's because of guys like you and all the fans who have supported me, everybody who helped contribute to the tip jar so that I could get on the road in the playoffs. That meant so much to me. I can't tell you how much it meant. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for everybody who's helped me continue to be here, because I still have a passion for what it is I do. And if you didn't support me, I wouldn't be able to put forth that passion into something I do on a daily basis. So thank you for that. The website, obviously lightninginsider.com. There's yearly subscription. There's monthly subscriptions, $40 for a year, $4.99 for a month. You can sign up. The first thing you're going to see is how to sign up on the website. The podcast is out there, the Lightning Insider podcast, wherever you find that. Wherever you get your podcast, you can find it. Just simply search Lightning Insider. And I'm hoping for next season that there'll be more opportunity with Lightning Radio to kind of get back involved with that, because I really enjoy being able to do that. The daily interaction I had when I was doing that show pre-pandemic was great. Stephanie was one of the greatest ones who would send me she would listen every day, and she would send me a question. Bob was the same way. If anybody knows Bob on Twitter, and specifically would send me questions every day. I love that interaction, and I hope I can get back to that again starting next season.
You were doing some of the post games, right? During the playoffs, right? The live.
During the playoffs, I took over the pregame show, the pregame show, the opening, I can't remember what it was now. The pregame skate show. Ooh.
Yeah. Okay.
Somewhere Chief is going. What's he just saying?
Yeah.
I
Trust me, Chief ain't watching this. Don't worry.
But I'm pretty sure Chief's saying that to anybody that's talking to him right now. It doesn't matter whose side the Chief.
Yeah, so we'll see. I haven't had those conversations yet. Looking forward to next season, but I hope I get that opportunity to do it, because again, I hope my passion comes through in what I write, what I say, the radio shows that I do. Some of the post game stuff I would fill in for Jay Retcher when he wasn't able to do the last call show. Fill in as an analyst sometimes with Jay as well. So I'm hoping that stuff continues to next season. But again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all the support everybody has given me over the last 6-7 years.
Yeah, we love it, man. I think I speak for everyone when when we hear you come on And you get those spots on NHL Network. We get a little giddy when your name comes up and you pop on there. I'm like, yes,
that's my guy. That's our guy. Yeah.
So we appreciate
you have
it.
some great stories, but if people have not seen the story of how the transition from the Tampa Tribune to the Lightning Insider, and the story that you wrote on that, I gotta say that's probably one of your best stories that you have written, about what you had to go through, and just, if anybody just takes the time to read that, you will know what this team means to Erik and why he is still doing this, because back then he said, this is it, and there's so many times along the road that you've had to go over some bumps with this franchise, with different things, and you still stick with it. So from all the fans, we appreciate you.
For sure.
So but definitely check out his website.
Yeah. So if anybody hasn't heard that story, I'll just give you a little snippet of it. In round 2, game number 3 in New York, I was in my hotel room the afternoon of game 3 when I found out the Tribune went under and I no longer had a job. I'll never forget that day for many, many reasons. You wonder what's next, right? And what was weird, and I didn't write this in what I wrote, as Thomas was alluding to. Like, all of a sudden, TV stations wanted to talk to me, right? Like, I'm not supposed to be the news. I'm supposed to report the news, right? And that was a different situation for me, and it kind of gave me some perspective on, what I was doing. And, I remember sitting in my room that night trying to just remember everything and take in everything that went on, and the number of people who reached out to me, whether it was, on my cell phone, which, by the way, got wiped out. My cell phone got wiped out
Instantly.
Yeah.
I remember from the story, you were like, you had no numbers to even call anybody.
I had people texting me. I had no idea who it was, right? Because we don't dial numbers anymore. We dial contacts in our phones, right? So I had people texting me and calling me. I had no idea who they were. I even had to say, okay, my phone got wiped out. Who is this again? Right? Like, even former players, Lightning players, were reaching out to me, and and I remember thinking this at the time. You don't realize the impact you have, because I sat behind a computer screen and wrote for a newspaper, and that newspaper was distributed to 350,000 people a day, whether they read it or not. It was distributed to that many people, and then with the online situation, people would read the stuff online. You never knew the impact you had until that day happened, and it really hit me. It really hit me, the number of people that I impacted and appreciated what I did, including the one that really got me was from Andrew Weiss. I'm sure everybody on here understands and knows who Andrew Weiss is, especially through his Twitter feed. He said he remembers started reading me when he was like 6 years old, right? Like, he would bring in the paper to his class, and that's what his reading would be. And that was a day that when I read that kind of really hit me hard. So for me to still be here, 5-6 years later after all that happened, I'm appreciative, and I can't say enough how much it means to me to have everybody still supporting me after all this time.
I don't know if I've ever said it, but I remember I was at Amalie Arena for a watch party in Thunder Alley, and we got the news that they had folded, and Tampa Tribune's was right around the corner from Amalie Arena, and the talk that night was you were up there, and that literally you had just been let go in the middle of this playoff. Why you're up in New York, right? New York.
I was in my hotel room in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
I think I was at panel side for that game.
And I remember, just real quick, I remember too debating whether or not I wanted to go to the game, right? Because things had hit me pretty hard, and the hotel room in Brooklyn was just a few blocks from Barclays Arena, and I sat there and said, maybe I don't want to go. I don't want to be subjected to any of this. But then I thought, you know what? This might be the last game I ever get to do from a professional standpoint. So I went, and I'm glad I did, right? Because I had colleagues coming up to me and saying, hey, I'm so sorry about what happened. Let me know if I can do anything. The couple of stories I've relayed other places, but, when I walked into the locker room after the game, obviously Steven Stamkos and Ben Bishop were both injured at that time. They both pulled me aside and said, no, actually Bishop was playing, forgive me. But they both pulled me aside. What the hell happened? I was reading this stuff on Twitter all day. What the hell happened? And I remember telling Bishop, what the hell are you worried about me for? You got a playoff game to go play. Why are you thinking about my situation?
So you're the reason that playoff run didn't.
No, they won that game. They won that game in overtime.
Yeah, yep. No, that was a great game. I was gonna say.
Yeah,
you
Brian
didn't go.
Boyle
That's a fantastic game.
But yeah, just seeing moments like that, it made me appreciate what it was I did. Not that I didn't appreciate it before, but to understand how it resonated with people, even players. Right? Like there's always this weird dynamic between the media and the players, but
not with you. Not with you in this team.
Sometimes.
Not at all. No.
But to see how, look, there's a human element, and sometimes you're not sure if that connects, right? Because we're media, they're players, we're invading their space constantly, right? So you don't know if that resonates. John Cooper pulled me into his room. I'm sure, the picture's still on my Facebook page. He pulled me into the room, and I don't want to share what he said then because that was private. But, he pulled me in to kind of say, hey, we understand what's going on with you. So, that stuff meant a lot. And again, that's not part of the story that I've made public too many times. But it just meant a lot.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, man. And I want to say that as a guy that moved here in 2002, that was genuinely just a hockey fan, moved around, spent a lot of time in Florida, as a young kid, and became a hockey fan in Florida as a Navy brat. I didn't really have a team, so I moved here, and I didn't really get into like the sports media as much of it, even though I was really wanted to be a journalist in high school paper, blah, blah, all that stuff. But like, I never really followed through with that. So like when I moved here, it was you really leading you in the Tampa trip that got me into that again. And I know I wouldn't be sitting here doing this show if it wasn't for you. That's for sure. Like this show wouldn't exist without you, at least me in this share, because you're the one that kind of helped give me that. And there's, obviously a couple other guys in the area that kind of stuck with it, and especially since we've done the show that have supported us. But, you're that guy that's always been there for as long as I've been here. That's been the kind of the voice of the Lightning. And so it means a lot to all of us fans that you're still here and that you come on shows like ours, that you take the time, when you're on NHL Network, and then the fact that you still take the time to come slum it on our little show here. You know what I mean? That means a lot to us. And I know that in the short time we've been doing this, a lot of the reason we're doing this episode is because we've had people saying, hey, where have you guys been? It's been like 3 weeks because we miss you. Where have you been? Where have you been? And you start having that connection, and you start realizing that it's not just you sitting here behind the screen. It's the people on the other side of it. It's the people that are listening to the podcast, and they are just as much of a part of it as we are. And that once you have that connection, it's there, and it's gonna be there. And so it makes you feel, good whenever you realize that there's a connection there, and it's not just you in front of a computer screen. Like you said, there are people out there that are responding and resonating, that your words resonate with.
Yeah, I hope that's come across, and shout out to Jay Retcher too. Jay has been one of my biggest supporters, right?
Us
like
too.
He pulled me in when things were kind of looking not so great, and he said, "Hey, let's try and get you on a weekly segment." And and now it's it's a little bit of a paid segment, and a lot of that is because of Jay Retcher. And Jay, I put this on my Twitter feed after the Cup final was over. The opportunity to get to know him the last number of years. We shared a hotel room last year down in Sunrise. He invited me to his parents' home when they played.
This is a scoop right here.
Yeah, it is.
So wait,
This is real insider info.
Single J is a lot better than this lovey-dovey J, though. Single Jay was a lot more fun.
No. Jay with his Steph is really good too. I had a chance to be out with them the other night at their remote, and I got to meet Steph for the first time. I'm seeing Jay very much more. What's the right word? I want to choose the right word here. Not that he wasn't a happy guy before, like he's just happier. Like you can just see it. I can tell. Like I remember talking to him about that on the road at one point, saying, "Man, you look different." And it's because of the relationship that he's in. So great for him. But for him to, as I said on my Twitter feed after the Cup final was over, the opportunity to get to know him the last couple of years and spend some time with me, whether it was traveling, whether it was in hotel rooms, and we were kind of splitting the costs, that we can kind of split the costs a little bit. He's as down to earth and as genuine as he seems. I can tell you he is the same way off mic as he is on mic. He is a great human being, and his support has meant a lot to me as well.
Yeah. Well, you two came to the meet and greet in Nashville. Just you and Jay just pop up out of nowhere, like, hey guys. I mean, and just like they're on the alley when I was doing one of the post game shows during the finals there. Jay all of a sudden comes rolling out like it was butt crack of dawn. We had went late into it, and then all of a sudden he's pointing his phone at me and being like, "Hey, what are you doing? Get off their property!" And I was like, "Oh." So and he came over and said hi. I mean, you guys totally, like Stephanie says, Jay's a good dude, but just you're a down to earth person, and that's the thing. I mean, that's how I personally got to know you, from the back parking lot, you walking in, and I'd be like, oh, my God, there's Erik Erlendsson. Oh, my God. But then you just come over.
The only guy he fans out way more for than Steven Stamkos is Erik Erlendsson.
He'd be like, but you would just stand there and talk to us and be like, this is what I heard going on, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, oh, my God, they're real fans. They're real people that they have connection with. And I think that's why you guys are so respected and so loved in Tampa community, because you guys are real and you guys are genuine people.
Yeah. Well, and I can say, I mean, we talk about the franchise and the players and all that, but I think that mentality extends right down to you guys in the media, because you've all welcomed us with open arms. I mean, how easy would it be to dismiss what we do here if you guys that do this get paid for it and everything else, and like it's your livelihood and everything? You could easily be like, oh, these guys are a joke or whatever, and not support us and say, hey, they might take away from what I do or what. But it's not like that. Like you, Jay Retcher, our other buddy Peter Blake, all three of you guys do this for a living, and you've supported us and you share us and you talk about us and you aren't afraid to come on our show. And to me, that just shows that it's just a good community. It's not just the players. It's not just the franchise. It's not just the fans, the media, what you guys have there. It's also a great network and a great community of people. And it's just all about supporting people and trying to make this fan base and this community better.
Well, you know how to reach me. I am never afraid to come on with you. I'm always open. As long as the schedule permits, I always have time for you guys.
As long as you don't forget and then schedule a vacation afterward.
and here I am.
Hey, you're right, and you made it work.
I absolutely thought about going out on the back porch and having the Magic Kingdom fireworks off in the background while we were doing this, but the music was too loud, so I had to come
big time the hell out of us. I appreciate it. Not big timing us like that, man. Jeez.
But it was great. It was great watching the white cooked dinner and the sun dance through it. So that would have been something we would have got outside. So I like the inside better.
That was some hot microwave action in the background.
That's
there.
Right. It got me hungry. I was like, is she cooking for all of us? What's going on?
Snack time with Schoolie. Up next is snack time with Schoolie segment.
Listen, I will be over that way, Erik, in 2 nights. So if you're still there, I'll be hoping to meet you by the pool. And, we'll talk some more Lightning hockey. And here's what's really cool about having you on. So we got a bunch of questions. I know, Stephanie and Serena and the Queen are in the chat. So we had a bunch of questions from them, and we pretty much answered them all through just like basic conversation that we've had. So that's how good you are, is you answer everyone's questions just through normal back and forth dialogue. There was one that I don't think we touched on. This is from Fabio, who's over in Italy.
Yes,
Everybody knows him.
Yeah.
So he usually shows up live for the post game shows. I don't know how he does that during the playoffs, but he did ask, do you expect some other Magic trade or any other transaction that we're not expecting from JBB this offseason?
Well, it won't be a signing, I can tell you that, because there's no cap space. There's literally no cap space left. I don't expect it, but you can't rule it out. Look, Alex Killorn's name has been out there for a couple of years now. His no trade is a little bit modified now, so it's a little bit easier. If you went down that path, I'm not saying they are going to go down that path, but you could potentially make it easier to make that move. Look, their defense took a hit. There's no doubt their defense took a hit. So if you're looking to shore things up, that's an area where you're going to want to try and strengthen yourself a little bit. And whether that happens before training camp or if it happens prior to the deadline. I mean, one thing Julian has shown everybody, he is not afraid to make a move if he feels his team is going to get better from the move. I don't have anything that you can kind of see right now, so I guess that's where the unexpected part comes in. So I don't think you can rule it out, but I think if they went to camp right now with the roster that they have, I think they'd be comfortable with it and then see how things play out over the first couple of months of the season. Maybe after Bogosian comes back in particular to see how the defense works out after that point, because I think there are some question marks on defense that we haven't seen really since Shattenkirk was signed here.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think we're looking at how the roster is going to look at the beginning of the season. And I always kind of felt like this year it's going to be, you looked at Palat throughout this past season, your killer's this next season. Maybe they move him before the trade deadline. If not, they're going to keep him for that run, and then he's going to be able to test free agency at the end of next year.
Yeah. I have one question is, kind of like a follow-up on that. Like, remember how they made the move to bring in JT Miller, and then they signed him, and they thought he was part of the future, and then they got an opportunity to move him? Do you think any of these extensions or contracts signed this year might be a potential move like that, perhaps, to maybe... Because the one thing I think that JT Miller was different is I feel like they had a lot of talent that they were trying to bring up, and they knew exactly who might fill that role, and JT Miller was going to get them to kind of refill like the pipeline a little bit of assets. But like, I don't know. I mean, you saw what he's done. I mean, if we kept that guy, who knows what happens to this team instead of maybe a Palat or a Killorn even. Yes, I said it. Maybe instead of a Killorn. What do you think that maybe the Paul deal, or maybe one of these other, maybe even the Cirelli deal, if there's an opportunity to? And I'm just saying, do you see anything like that, or is this like, hey, we know this is the core that JBB wants?
I don't see Nick Paul going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, 7 years.
Such a good contract, yeah.
Well, yeah, $3.15 million cap hit. I mean, that's a really team-friendly cap hit. Look, I heard just through conversations, not anything solid or anything like that, is this an opportunity if you have to choose between a couple of players where, is Anthony Cirelli's stock ever going to be higher? Right? And I'm not saying that that's a conversation that the team has had, but it's just, just listening and talking to people around the team. If that's somewhere that you might look to, you can't rule it out. I don't foresee it. I think that they signed all three of those guys with the intention that they're young core players. And look, Anthony Cirelli is going to win a Selke Award just on his playoffs this year alone. That reputation grew by leaps and bounds, and you win championships with guys like Anthony Cirelli because of what they can do. I know his offense isn't where – look, if he was a 25-goal scorer, he's Patrice Bergeron 2.0.
Exactly.
Is what he is, right? Yeah. So I don't foresee that. I think they locked him up with the intention of him being a core player for a number of years. But as we know, you can't rule anything out in these situations because the salary cap is what it is, and you're always looking for ways to, maneuver and perform some gymnastics around it.
Yeah. But this is like going into this preseason with the the forward line and stuff. This is how we got Ross Colton a couple years ago. You know, it was an experimental, let's shift this person in, shift this person in. I mean, it wasn't an ABB and Colton and someone, maybe Fortier or someone else was in there in that link. And then Ross Colton ends up in that spot, and he hasn't left since.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where Cole Koepke comes in. Right? Because I see Koepke's path, similar route to Ross Colton, signed as a little bit of an older college player who came in and did what he did in Syracuse. Ross Colton worked on his game. And look, you saw signs of Ross Colton, as soon as he turned pro, that, hey, this is a guy that has a chance to play it. And just watching Cole Koepke one training camp last year and a couple of preseason games, you see not necessarily the same attributes, but the same type of career path that he went on. So, if Cole Koepke gets his opportunity this year, I see no reason why he couldn't be another Ross Colton, right? Because of and I think that's what a lot of the early 2-3 months of the season is going to be, particularly with the injuries that they have. A lot of experimentation, for lack of a better term, of who can play, who gets a cup of coffee, who can play with who plays on the right side, who plays with Victor Hedman. Where does Nemestikov fit in? A lot of those stuff, and I think we're going to see a lot of that early on because. With the salary cap, obviously we know Brent Seabrook's contract is going to push the LTI up. Well, at the start of the year, so is Cirelli and Bogosian's LTI contract. So that's going to give them more flexibility than they've had previously to be able to bring players up and down to get looks at them without having to worry about waivers to see if they can be that fit. That's where Fortier comes in. That's where Koepke comes in. That's where Gonçalves comes in.
That's a good point.
Even Jamel Smith. I mean, Jamel Smith kind of fell off the map this year because he got hurt in training camp, and we never really heard much from him again. He was lost on waivers. They brought him back on waivers. He's still in the organization. So there still are players that could kind of make that little bit of an impact in the early part of the season to kind of see where they fit in. And again, I think that's where the first 2 months of the season are going to factor in.
Could be a little bit of a blessing in disguise, going forward here the next couple of seasons, being able to try some of these guys out, see what they look like, see what how they fit. Do you have? I don't want to, I know you got things to do that you get paid for, but with your depth chart. But do you have Colton as that third line center pretty much locked in, or do you think that that's still kind of up in the air whether he plays center or wing?
I think it's up in the air. I currently have him as a wing because I think, and again, we have to put this depth chart together with injuries factoring in.
Right.
So I have Stamkos at center and Cirelli right now as third line wing, but for sure you could see Nick Paul. I mean, he took a ton of faceoffs on the latter half of the postseason at the center position. So Nemestikov is the same way. That's where the signing of Nemestikov. John Cooper likes versatility.
Just real quick, if you look at the roster, there are two guys on the forwards, or three players out of all the forwards that are listed as only one position players. Yeah. There's three of them that are, or two that are all three, and multiple left, right wing can play either wing. So you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
Yeah, the versatility matters to John Cooper. And not that Julian Brisebois is going out to look to just satisfy that aspect of it, but if you can bring in a player that fits that mold, I mean, Nick Paul we saw center or wing, Nemestikov center or wing, Ross Colton center or wing. I mean, he really, really likes the opportunity to have two guys on a line that can take faceoffs, right? Because if one guy gets kicked out, I mean, that was a factor in the Stanley Cup final because once Cirelli got hurt and he couldn't take faceoffs, you had Alex Killorn and Brandon Hagel on his line. Yeah. And even though Killorn played center in college, he hasn't played center in 9 years.
He's one of those guys I mentioned that only has one position designation as a left wing. That's it.
So when Cirelli couldn't take faceoffs, well, they tried Hagel. Well, Hagel wasn't really winning faceoffs. So that's when, especially, I don't know, was it game 5, game 3, where Nick Paul was moved up into that line, all of a sudden Nathan McKinnon, who was kept in check really for the most part of the Stanley Cup final, all of a sudden found some free space. And that look, that's not a knock on Nick Paul, but he's not Anthony Cirelli when it comes to a shutdown center. He's just not.
Right.
So that factored in to a couple of play. Actually, I think it was the deciding game. I think it was game 4. Game 4 is when it happened, when McKinnon, I think, scored his first goal, right?
Yeah.
On the power play, but that line started to find some space because they wanted somebody they could take faceoffs on that line because Cirelli was injured.
Yeah.
So that stuff matters to John Cooper. Flexibility, versatility, what can you do? So, that's where Colton comes in, Nemestikov comes in, Paul comes in, guys that can play either wing. There's a lot of that's one of the things looking at this roster heading into training camp. There's a lot of versatility amongst the forwards.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the one thing that, like, even though it's going to be a question mark about what the lineup and the depth chart really is, I think the overall, you've got to be fairly excited about the potential lines that you could form out of this talent, out of the way these guys could play. And I always thought that that's one thing that I liked about Stamkos and Cirelli, why it kind of stinks that when they're on the same line, only one of them plays center. It's great that you can switch them both out as center and right wing, and you've always got Killer on that left side doing what he always does, and that really brings versatility to that line. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens now with Cirelli and Stamkos, and do you want to keep, like we talked about, Stamkos having such a great season at center? Do you think that, as a coach, do you think Cirelli is absolutely a center, or is he just a forward that you can have him take draws, but he can play on the wing? You know what I mean? Like, that's the one thing that you have a lot of good options here with this forward core.
Yep. It's the first time in a while we can look at this roster going into training camp and saying, I'm not sure who's going to play with who and who's going to play where. You got 9 players, and I'm sure that John Cooper and Jeff Blashill and Jeff Halpern and Rob Zettler are already toying around. Okay, let's try this. Let's look at this. Look at this. Look at this.
I love to see that group text thread. They're just randomly texting line combinations to each other.
Yeah, it's the first time in a while that we can say that there's some uncertainty heading into training camp.
Yeah.
Well, what we'll be doing on our next episode is we are going to be playing coach, and we're going to make our own lines like we always tend to do on this show with a shooter game. So, it makes for a good off season. It makes for a good beginning of the season because there is plenty of stuff to talk about. I don't think the team's going to drop off too much. I know a lot of people worried about losing McDonough, losing Palat, losing these players. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got a massive core of players that are going to be back, and that's what's going to keep us excited throughout the off season and into the beginning of the season here.
Yeah, and if I can make a quick comment on Mikhail Sergachev, I know this is a big question. I heard you guys talking a little bit about it. I saw some of the comments here about him making more than Victor Hedman. The one thing to keep in mind, but Victor Hedman signed that contract, 5 years ago? But if you want to look at percentage, and this is something I wrote after the contracts were signed, at the time what the cap was when those players signed their contract, Victor Hedman took up 10.7% of the cap. Mikhail Sergachev takes up 10.3%. And that's based on right now's cap. Obviously, the contract extension doesn't kick in until next year. We don't know what the cap is going to be after this year, but that percentage is going to drop. So I think that sometimes you have to take that into perspective on what's the percentage of the cap a player is taking up. So, it's more actual dollars per year on a cap hit than what Hedman is making. But in percentage-wise, it's actually less based against the cap. So
we were saying that right before you came on, that in all sports, someone signs 5 years later, and then you have somebody that maybe not the caliber, but that price now has went way up. And you see that with a lot of different sports where the position that you're drafted is a certain amount guaranteed every year. That changes too because the market value goes up and everything else. So, Hedman would have gotten way more has he signed in his contract now.
Yep. Yeah. He'd have gotten more than Sergachev for sure. He'd have gotten closer to the 9.5 that Point and Vasilevsky and Kucherov were getting for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, and let's not forget the fact that Sergei made quite a savvy move just weeks before
Milstein
this happened, and went and got that same agent that his Russian compatriots also used. So
Dan Milstein.
By the way, I talk occasionally to Dan just through chatting on Instagram, and I've asked him if we could have any of his roster on the show, and it was a flat out No.
For $30 million.
We've tried. We're not big budget enough yet, but we're gonna get you, Dan. I even asked for. I was gonna ask, what about you, Dan? What about you, Dan? No. So we'll keep cracking away at them.
keep chipping away. Eventually, they all break down.
Hey, we got Dinger on the show eventually. You know what I mean? So anything's possible.
And we got our number one all-time guest, third or fourth appearance. We're not counting, something like that. Erik Erlendsson. He's got, I mean, I'm sure you got to go sign up for some fat passes or something for tomorrow.
Right.
Thomas Schooley looks like he's about to get fired from his job. My wife's messaging me, why are you still podcasting? So we should probably.
I'm the only one Footloose and
thing
fancy
up.
free. My wife and son are sleeping. So
Stash family don't even know he's missing.
you did something right, Stash. But
as you know, I got to go eat dinner.
Yeah,
that's right.
We'll let you go and reheat the tacos. It is Tuesday. But hey, yeah, we appreciate you so much for coming on. We'll have to get you back on before the season starts here. And hey, if you're not already supporting Erik, lightninginsider.com, go do it. We need him to keep covering this team, so he'll keep coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the
microwave for his family.
Yeah. Maybe next time I'll have a more friendly background.
And listen, we love the live action shots. All right,
Yep.
That's what it's all about. We keep it real around here. That's what it's all about, brother.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Erik. We'll give you a lightning strike on the way out. Watch out.
Good sugar. Good sugar.
All right, so
that went way longer than I expected it to.
Yeah, it was good conversation too. I mean, literally all these questions that I had kind of jotted down from Twitter and Instagram, pretty much just answered them without actually asking.
That's my fault, Michael. I will have an update for you. That's my fault.
Yes, Michael was messaging me before the show. I didn't even ask him yet, Michael, about your speaker. All right, so I have a shooter game. We're gonna wait till next episode to do that game. And next episode,
get back to work.
Yeah, next episode's going to be sometime in August. So make sure you follow Shooter in the Stash. Hit us up on Twitter at Shooter, or no, what's our Twitter? At We the Thunder Podcast.
At We the Thunder Podcast.
No, at We the Thunder Pod.
No, We the Thunder Pod.
Yes. I know a lot of you have found it.
It's all about the brevity here. We're all into the brevity. It's We the
got-
Thunder Pod. You got to keep it short.
And of course Thunderbolts, and you'll find us next time we go live, which will probably be mid to end of August. And we've already got some ideas for that. So we will see you then. Anything else, boys? You want to go around the horn? Any final comments, since you won't be able to have a microphone in your face for another month?
God, I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. No, I mean, again, it's just huge to appreciate. Shout out to Double E for being here. Everyone that showed up here on this random show that we did kind of out of nowhere in the middle of the season or postseason, off season, wherever we are. I'm so confused because it's been weeks without hockey. I'm lost. I haven't left this room. Actually, I haven't left. I've been waiting for the next show to come on. No, it's just, it's good to see you guys. It's good to be back on. It's good to have the support of Erik and all you guys in the chat, everyone that's here watching us. And, a special shout out to all of us to listen to us on Spotify and actually listen to the podcast and don't just watch the show live when we record it. There's a good amount of you out there, and we appreciate you just as much as anybody else, if not more, because those numbers are kind of big to us in other ways. So look out for more from us this postseason, or this coming preseason. I mean, see, I can't keep my season straight right now because I'm used to, celebrating right now. Now I don't know why I'm just waiting for the next season. I'm not celebrating right now. Yeah, it's weird not to be celebrating or reveling in victory. But yeah, watch out for some more fun stuff from us. And we'll be back in August, and I can't wait for that because we should have some cool stuff to talk about then too.
We got a smoke in the chat.
Oh, we got smoke.
School, you got anything else? Or you got to go bust some people?
Yeah, it was great catching up dinner with you two. What was it? A week ago, 2 weeks ago? But this is how weird we are. We couldn't even figure out where to meet together, even though
that was hilarious.
As much as we look at like fuck ups on here, just imagine us trying to meet up somewhere
up in real life. It's
yeah.
ridiculous. ridiculous. Trying to get us.
I
together
circled around this restaurant about 7 different times trying to figure out if I was going downtown. But of course, Shooter thought the restaurant was downtown. It was.
I'm at the bar already drinking because that's what I do, waiting for these guys to show up. Meanwhile, Schooley's circling the parking lot like freaking Dr. Dre, Eminem. I don't know, one of those.
So, but it's great to see the people back. It's great seeing E come on here. Lot longer than we thought, and we tend to see that a lot with our guests. They come on here and they tell us, I got 10-15 minutes for you, and then we try to let them go after 15 minutes. Shooter cuts us off and is like, okay, we'll let you go, and they're like, no, keep going. I mean, and we continue to see that, which is good for us and also good for the fans, and even good for that guest, because that guest feels comfortable and wants to come back and stuff like that. So thank you to everybody that watches, and thank you to Eric.
Yeah, and stay tuned. We're gonna have another guest on next month and throughout the off season. So, hey, and special shout out to the podcast listeners. It's actually blown my mind how much the podcast version of this show grew in the last, I guess, right before the playoffs started. It's crazy that you guys are all out there just listening to the audio version. So that's why we've been always posting it up there after every show. So don't forget, if you miss us live, you can always catch the replay on Facebook, YouTube, but we do have the audio version. This is technically a podcast. So thank you, podcast listeners. Until next month.
Yes. And it is. There's the podcast is We the Thunder. The show is We the Thunder. We are the Thunder. Yeah. If you go download the podcast, give us a nice little 5-star review. That'd be cool. That'd be awesome.
All right. Until next month, this has been We the Thunder. Don't forget to be the Thunder.
That's it?
Yep.
That's it.